In this video help tutorial, we're in the purchase order input screen. If you go over to the menu, you'll see that the purchase order input screen is right here. We're going to be covering the input requirements. The first thing you do when you come in this screen, you do one of two things. You either add a new record or you add an existing record by doing a find. So you come up here and start the find, perform the find using the purchase ID of the individual purchase order that you're looking for. Typically you would do this if you're coming in to clear out the received items. For example, in this row you see 2 items received and a balance of 1, and this one is no received and you have a balance due of 1. Let's go up and look at the first things first. The vendor itself is the vendor you're purchasing from. When you add a new vendor in the vendor list, which is this icon over here, you would have the list of each individual vendor that you work with. All you'd have to do is pick that vendor and it'll drop in the information. The next thing you would do is you'd put in the date that you're actually placing the order. And in the same thing, there's an order date at the top of the screen where these could vary. For example, the order date might be one day and then the PO date is a different day. Maybe there's a requirement for a PO to be used and that particular would be the PO date. Ordered by, you would type in your name if you're the person doing the order. If you receive everything on the order, you'd put in the receive date after, obviously, the date that you started the order. It would be somewhere after that date, and then you would put that in. You can either click here, and if you're on the iPad, you'll have a scroller where you'll pick the date. The next one is the PO order, which is calculated for you. Basically, when you put in the information in each row, you would put the order quantity times the cost, get the actual amount for the subtotal, plus any shipping. If you have no shipping, you would leave this blank. For the line total, it would add the shipping in with the subtotal. The quantity down here is the received and then the balance due. If you want to go to the portal to see an individual record, you would, for this row, you would click on the portal button. If you want to see the actual inventory item and go to the inventory, you'd click on this button for inventory. The information at the top of the screen is the equipment inventory, which is also accessible through the inventory button. The work order, depending on the work order that you're actually working against, you could go ahead and see that work order, but you're not going to see the purchase information on that screen. That would be on this screen, but you'd be working off of that work order. Purchase list view, let's go ahead and look at that list view. The list view shows each individual purchase order. And in this case, it's going to show cleared, meaning everything has been received. And you can have the purchase ID right here to identify each record. The received date would go in here. And then if you had a purchase order amount for each record, it would be in here. You can go back to the purchase order by clicking on this one. Let's go ahead and go back to the number 2 where we're working. Comes back into this record. You'll notice down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the sum of the ordered amount. And you'll see the sum of the ordered balance. You'll see an outstanding balance of 2, these 2 right here. And until this is cleared in 0, you actually haven't completed this purchase order record. Now let's go back up and look at some of the information up here. It says office phone, sales phone, and shipping phone. These are added in the vendor ID as far as the vendor list. So let's go over and look at the vendor list. If you go to the vendor list, you can pick whatever vendor it is that you want to use. In this particular case, let's go to this one. And what you would do is fill in the address and the rest of this information and the contacts. And then, of course, the vendor combo screen is what is used in the inventory and in the purchase record to add that information into the drop-down. You go back to the purchase portal. This would be the individual portal for each row within the record. And you can see the amount and the received. And then you can go back to the purchase or the inventory to see the update for the information for the received. Now, as you receive items for each individual row and you put in the received amount, you can go to the actual inventory and see that it'll update over there. This is that closed loop inventory system where either the invoice, the purchase order, or the information that you use as far as loading the received items in will vary that record according to the amount of items that you actually purchase. And there is a invoice history built into the inventory system so you can see it in the equipment inventory. Let's go back to the purchase record. The purchase portal we've seen we know what the equipment purchase work order are, or the work order itself, and the list view we've seen. Now let's go look at the actual report for the individual items. In this case, it's showing PO ID number 2, and down here, as I stated before, you'll have the date and information as far as the purchase order record. You'll see the actual information that was in the rows as far as each individual items, and the summary for that, and the outstanding balance. So we had 2 rows, and we have each individual one that we can receive. Typically what I would do, and you have the choice to either go to the purchase order itself and change the received, or you can do it in the report. If you come into the screen and you have all the records showing here for all records for all the purchase orders, you would do a find. You would put in the ID number for your purchase order. That would bring up the records for that particular purchase order. Then what you would do is, you see here it shows a balance in red. Once you have it at the correct balance, for example, if I update this and put in the 1 and show that it's received, you'll see that it'll turn to 0 and the color will go away. So if you come into this report and you're looking at all records, you can see all records that have an outstanding balance on each row within that report. So it makes it pretty simple to find the things that you're looking for. Of course, you can always return it. You'll see the sum of the balance and the balance order sum. So the balance is 2, and each record has its individual items as far as the summary total, and you'll see over here that it has that data as far as this should be I believe the tax sum order. Okay, this is the shipping, and the sum for the shipping, the sum for the order, and the order balance is the actual sum of items that you're working with. If you do a find, the headers up at the top will disappear. What you want to do is come back over and click on the order, run the report, and what it'll do is it'll bring up the correct headers and everything and the information that you have in there. As you go down to each record, it'll highlight the active record that you're reading. Okay, let's go back into the purchase. We've noticed that we've got everything in here, and notice that there is a new blank row here sitting here. The only thing we haven't covered, and this is kind of interesting, is that if you click on this, you're going to see the amount of the last time this product was ordered and what the numeric number would be for that. So that when you're checking with the vendor, you can see what the last per item price was that you paid for this item. So let's go down and look. If you look for this, we're looking for a 510-bed main computer. In this case, let's go ahead and go down until we find that. And then this is it right here. It's $349 is what we paid for that item, is for the last one. If you click on it, it will add the $349 in there. And this is the actual cost. This was the last buy. This is the cost in this particular case that you're actually paying for it this time. Now, if you see a variance in these two, you probably want to check your vendors and see if there's a better price out there. So $349 in this particular was saying the last buy. So you can bargain with your vendors for a new price, and also the same thing goes for this item here. And if you look in there, if you go to the it's called Smart Controller. Smart Controller. So let's go down. Now, this might be a little tedious sometimes to do this, and maybe once you put it in there and you're going to use it, you may find that you find them a lot faster. I don't even see the Smart Controller in here, but okay, so I don't see the Smart Controller in there, but what I can do is obvious. I can go to the inventory and find the Smart Controller. And there's a controller board up here. I should look at the actual inventory item number, and that would tell me what it is. So let's go in here, and this is the one we're going to work with because we know that that's it. And it's not that one. So what we can do is do a find for the Smart Controller, and that's how you would find it. So you do action, you'd put in the equipment name for the Smart Controller, and that's how you would find it. These are the same kind of things that I usually go through when I'm working with products. In fact, I'm going to show you that all you have to do is just put in Smart, and it should bring it up. So we say perform the find, and there's your Smart Controller. And you can see in here that it shows the stock prices at $230 and the standard price, and the purchase cost would have been whatever you are purchasing it for. In this case, let's just come up with a bogus number and say it's $199. Shows your margin. Now in this case, I had a lot of example records, so I didn't have everything filled in because I don't take that much time when I'm just doing this. There's no discount applied. The inventory is no inventory at this point. There's one quantity on order. If I receive it, of course, then it's going to update the on hand. It's going to turn this into 0, and it's going to show 1 received. Okay, so let's go back to the purchase order. And let's see. Purchase order. We've looked at the list view, the order portal, the purchase report. Let's go look at the vendor screen now to complete all this information. The vendor information is pretty straightforward. It's basically the information, and we've covered this before. So if we're looking at these items for the vendor, there's a vendor list, which we looked at, and we're going to make sure that we covered all these. Equipment billing list view. This is each one of the items for the billing list view and the amounts. Equipment billing list view. And if you want to go see the individual records, just tap on the arrow at the end of the record, and that'll bring that in. So you can see it. And now you have the equipment billing list view, and then the list rate type. This is the actual list discount rate that we are using. I put in a 00 so that if you have something in there and you're on the iPad or the iPhone, you can pick a 0. If you had a field in there that said 1%, you didn't want that, you can go back to 00, and that'll change the calculation. Okay, if you have any questions about how to use this information that we just covered, we did the purchase order and the vendor information that's tied to the purchase order. So that should pretty much cover all the purchase items. The next thing we're going to be looking at is the expenses and going through the expenses screen. Then we're going to come back and we're going to pick off some of the sub screens that we haven't looked at before, for example in this area and these, and then we're going to cover those, and we'll also do the expenses. So let's go ahead and go through that in the next video. Thank you.